as we conclude, I want to address something that has been, happening here in this country and actually other countries. There is a real battle that's going on over what's taking place in Israel. And interestingly enough, the three major countries that have announced that they're going to declare for Palestinian statehood, quote unquote Palestinian statehood, really kind of, it's a pretty stupid thing that they're doing for a few different reasons, and I want to go into those and why it's so ridiculous that they're doing this. First of all, let's make sure that we understand the quote Palestinian people have never existed as a government. They've never existed as having a particular location. Their borders have never been defined because really there wasn't a quote Palestinian until the term started to be used by the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization of Yasser Arafat. And there wouldn't have ever been such a place if not for the establishment of the nation of Israel coming back into the land in 1948. If they weren't in the land, there wouldn't have been a PLO. Nobody would know the name Yasser Arafat, and they wouldn't understand the term, quote, Palestinian. So interestingly enough, when I hear the people like Macron or any of the people speaking about any of this, the new prime minister in Canada and of course the leaders of Britain, same thing. These are all people who are saying we're going to recognize a Palestinian state. Anybody who hears that ought to be able to say, what Palestinian state? You want to establish something that has no roots? And people would say, well, they established Israel. Well, Israel's been in the land for thousands of years. It was something deeded to them as a heritage from God himself. He's the one who said it. Their displacement from the land was because of their disobedience, and God bringing them back into the land is because he's wrapping things up here. So if you're trying to talk about the, quote, establishment of Israel, they've always been there. There is nobody in the, quote, Palestinian groups who can say, well, we've had the nation of Palestine before. Palestine, or the place known as Palestine, was really more of a pejorative. It was a thumb in the eye to the Jewish people. And it comes from, basically, it's a mockery of the Philistines. So the idea of Palestine, that's what it's been referred to by people. And it was really done as a way of just kind of, again, putting the thumb in the eye of Israel, again, who was displaced from the land for 1900 years until the middle of last century. But if we want to go back and look at who that is, who are the, quote, Palestinians, take a look at where they're from. They're from all over that part of the world. So it's not as though they're a nation. They're Jordanians and Egyptians and all kinds of different people that are there. Many of them lived in Israel just as Jews lived in Israel before 1948. So these are people who really, so much of the world didn't care at all about Israel, what's modern Israel. Nobody really cared much about it or really wanted to much govern the whole thing. It didn't become important until Israel was back in the land, and that was when it all began to be an issue. But I would say to Macron or anyone else who says we're going to recognize a Palestinian state, I would say, okay, great, where? Where are you going to put it? So not only where are you going to put it, what are the defined borders? And what are those defined borders? Who's going to govern it once you decide where you want to put this quote unquote Palestinian state? Certainly can't be Hamas. It couldn't be in Gaza. The place is I don't think people realize just the extent of it. Hamas has so undermined the ground there that you won't be able to build anything until they could collapse all the tunnels and backfill it to where it can take the weight of civilization. So the idea that you're going to somehow just say, let's demand that Israel gives back Gaza to Hamas. If that's your Palestinian state, Hamas can't run it. They've proven that, and Israel won't allow that to be the case anyway. It's a terrorist state. So what about the PLO? Are you going to put it somewhere in the West Bank, which is traditionally, biblically speaking, Judea-Samaria? Well, first of all, if you look at who the PLO is, we call them the Palestinian Authority, and that's just really an interesting thing because the Palestinian Authority is just the renaming and the rebranding of what was the PLO under Yasser Arafat. And when you looked at Yasser Arafat, heard the things that he said, he was an avowed terrorist. And the PLO did all kinds of terrorist activities. So just because you change the name to the Palestinian Authority and give it to Mahmoud Abbas, He is Yasser Arafat in a suit and with a different face, but he's the same terrorist. He's the same guy with the same objectives. Read the charters. Read them of Hamas or of the PLO, and what are their stated purposes for being. So the idea that you somehow can create, quote unquote, out of thin air, a Palestinian state, which is a way of recognizing a nation that has never existed, never had borders, never had denominations of coin, never had a leader, never had a king, never had any of those things. Somehow you think that that will, and I've seen that Canada put the caveat on this, if you don't, Israel, if you don't have a ceasefire in Gaza, then we're going to recognize a Palestinian state. Well, again, one of the stupidest things I've ever heard anybody say, because just claiming something doesn't make it real. And the thought that somehow Israel is going to say we're going to give up land for peace, or somehow of making the Canadians happy, they tried that. We call it Gaza. And so that's about a 20-year ago proposition, and Israel left Gaza, and look what happened in 20 years. So a terrorist state takes over, builds all the infrastructure for what ended up culminating on October the 7th of 2023. And if you think Israel's going to sign off on that again, you are crazy. So again, Macron or whoever is saying these things, where do you plan on putting it, and who do you think is going to be in charge of it? And do you think that for a moment that they're going to recognize Israel, that they're going to have some kind of peaceful relationship with Israel inside Israel's borders when that nonsense has been going on for the past decades? There's nothing that's going to change that. So I do find this last thing, and I'll close with this. I find it interesting that whether it's Canada or France or England, that all three of these countries started having a large amount of migration of people who have the same religious beliefs, of those who are in the West Bank and those who are in Gaza, Islam. And those people are becoming very, very vocal in those countries. So much so that major cities, London being one of them, is run by a man who is a Muslim. And take a look at parts of not only France but also of England, and look at where that kind of heavy migration that's coming from other parts of the world who do not share the values of not only France or of Britain, or in this case Canada as well. And I don't know that you can make the case otherwise, but this seems to be very much a way of trying to placate the people there in their own countries by taking up for the Palestinians and really trying to pressure Israel to do something that is not in their best interest. Interestingly enough, I don't think for a moment that they fully understand this, or maybe they do. But let's face it, if you're going to throw the lifeline to Hamas, you're going to prolong the problem. You're telling Israel that they've got to recognize a ceasefire and stop all the hostilities in Gaza. You've just thrown a lifeline to Hamas. That's what you've done. What's left of it. And again, let's be reminded of this. If there weren't any more hostages, they would finish this job. As it is, they're going to probably have to annex large portions of Gaza and have to start looking for what's left of the hostages, because Hamas will not give them up voluntarily. They don't want peace. What really, really makes me furious with the leaders of Britain, France, Canada, from what I hear, Portugal, is that they're not putting the pressure on the people who are causing the problem. Do yourself a favor, if you've not had a chance to do it, look at some of the people who have actually had a chance to go and see the mountains of food that is ready to go into Gaza, but they can't get it past Hamas. So all these things that they're claiming that Israel's starving the people, the provisions are there. They just can't get it to the people because Hamas won't allow it to go through any source other than them. And we know that they take it for themselves and sell it to the people. What should be free is really ultimately it's Hamas who's making it impossible for people to find any relief in this. People need to get educated on this, and if they're not, they ought to be. So when you see the fools out there from these governments demanding of Israel something that is not in their best interest, the idea that they would try to strong arm them is just, again, it helps us to understand it is a spiritual matter. It is not a geopolitical one. It's playing out in geopolitics, but the unbelievable one-sided hatred towards Israel when they're not the oppressors and they're not the violent ones. They're not the ones who started this whole thing. It can only have as an explanation that there is a spiritual matter going on behind the scenes that is not being discussed. So we will pick up next week. We'll start going through the rest of the Beatitudes, and we'll pick up at that. But if you have any questions on anything that I've shared, by all means, contact me through the ministry's website, oldpaththeology.net, and I will be happy to answer any questions that you have on this. It is important that we genuinely understand what's happening in the world around us and what's happening in our spiritual life as we try to balance those two things out. We start with having a good understanding of where we are spiritually speaking with the Lord. And then from there, we move outward to how does that play out in how we interact with this world. So very much looking forward to getting through the Sermon on the Mount. We'll spend a number of weeks in this. There's some very, very important matters that Jesus addresses here that really the church should be very careful about here and now and pay close attention to. So